Welcome to Amy's Bookshelf Reviews podcast. It is a spin-off of the website and book review site of Amy's Bookshelf Reviews. Amy's Bookshelf Reviews podcast is about book reviews, a writer's muse, a book's peruse, author interviews, and literary news. Welcome to the new year, where new things may happen with this. I hope you all enjoy, and thank you for listening.
Here we go. Good evening, listeners. I'm Amy, and welcome to Amy's Bookshelf Reviews podcast. Today, we have an author joining us. Please introduce yourself and let the audience know how they can connect with you.
Yeah, hi, Amy. This is Bob Freeman, and I'm a writer of science fiction. My website is www.h2liftship.com. I know it's a hard one to say, even for me.
So, recently, you've been writing I guess it was the series, the H2 lift ships. And I do know that actually the 2 is supposed to be like H2O, right, kind of thing, like where
lowercase 2 for hydrogen.
Yeah. It doesn't always show up, but recently, your book Beyond Luna has been released on Audiobook. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Beyond Luna first?
Okay, well that's the first book in the series, and I wrote it in 2021 when I just started writing them. I was 70 then, so I figured it's about time to write a book or two. It basically covers the start of the Captain Guaciela's trip on the H2 lift ship, the Luna Cola. And what they are basically hydrogen balloons that launch from Earth. They can compress the hydrogen and blast off to outer space, turning the hydrogen balloon into a solar sail. She's got a crew of mutated animals, a dog, of course, because that's the main character for me, an orangutan who works as basically a sail handler, and an octopus who are navigators for most of the ships. Octopuses are curious because they communicate with colors, and they've learned to communicate with Morse code, and they can also use a diaphragm against a sucker to speak something approaching English. And since no one can understand their color names, they all call themselves octopus. So it makes it easy to at least talk to them. And they basically travel through the heliosphere, which is our soul's magnetic bubble, trading with asteroids and doing normal things like fending off pirates and starting a war, dealing with parents and assorted things that always cause trouble. And we get entertaining stuff. We try to keep it more toward the science end of things, where we see how things work. If you lived on an asteroid, how the chemistry would work, how microbiology works, what's it like to be living in outer space with no gravity, and how you grow food and manage. And most of the people are pretty good, and I've got a trigger warning I usually tell people about.
Okay.
Because it's a hard science book, and if people aren't interested in hard science, then I don't want them to waste their time book. And I could read that for you if you like.
Oh, please do. Thank you.
Okay, the trigger warning is, these space stories take place in Soul's heliosphere. They contain real science, pseudoscience, and stuff pulled out of thin air. If you enjoy long, complex lead-ins as part of a world-building story, the series is for you. Otherwise, maybe try something lighter and flashy. There's no blasters, no FTL drives, no computers blasting fireworks, no physical violence, and no sex except for a little kerfuffle. Oh, pardon me, I can't get that word right. I can spell it, though. With canines and their pheromones. There are some death issues on the Mort asteroids, but after living on Soul's rocks, we all die eventually. Gambling, some drinking, passive-aggressive families, lying, stealing, double-dealing, and pirates. In other words, normal sentience, mostly nice. Scientific names, genus and species, puns, and unique spellings abound. Written in English with a few French, Yiddish, Spanglish, Latin, and Doglish words thrown in the mix. Knowledge of octopus's color languages and Morse code are not required, but may come in handy. And if that doesn't scare off most people who want a fantasy, I don't know what will.
I mean, I love the books. So, speaking as someone who read them, and then I got to listen to the audiobook, which is also very incredible. So, I enjoyed it, but I'm not a, wasn't too much in my science that I like is more like geological and also planetary and things like that. So I find it very interesting. And I think that more science fiction books should actually have at least a hint of hard science within it. And, some may have that or, but I found that it was really interesting, and I loved the parts, I loved the characters. I loved using how you use the octopus, or I don't know, is it octopi? I have no idea.
It's actually octopuses. I had to look that up myself because you don't use the Latin plural for octopuses.
Okay, because I wasn't sure. I just I see octopus, I think of one, but having the thing about them communicating, and I found that interesting. I mean, the most things that I know that underwater mammals and other sea creatures, they have their own language and way of communication, whether it's sonar or just how they look at each other. I don't know, but so I love that most of your beings are, they're non-human.
Yeah, I tried to keep away from the alien things, and in fact, it was written as a contrast to all the modern tropes. So there's no violence, there's no explosions. Well, there are some in there because you've got a war going on,
right?
But no magic. I consider faster than light drives to be magic. The transporters are magic. It's too easy a plot. Well, we get stuck somewhere. Oh, we'll fire up the transporter, and there we go.
Yeah.
And in my stories, they actually have to think through a problem and come up with a solution. And surprisingly enough, they usually do. I'm not in control of what they come up with, unfortunately. I just set them from point A to point B and let the characters tell me what to do. And it's worked out pretty good. I'm having fun with it.
Well, that's good. And when I write, that's the same way that I do it. I'm just like a medium for my characters just to come out on paper. If I have to stop and think about what could come next, I have to just walk away from it and then I can come back and the characters just kind of tell me what they're doing, I'm
exactly.
Like, they're, whatever their whim is, that's how it goes. I never know how it's going to end. Just know that the characters are going to lead me through to the end. So yeah. I really, I like it when writers admit that they do that.
Yeah, and that's the fun part. I hadn't expected it. I said I didn't want violence in the book, and then they decided to have a war. So what could I do?
Yeah,
I had to play it through. But that's the fun part about the characters.
Exactly, and like your books are the entire series that you have that have been published. They're in print, and print for like paperback, and then you have the digital format, and now you started with doing, is this your first audiobook that you have tried to put on, or the first book you've had to put on audiobook, or tried, at least attempted to?
Yeah, that was fun because I found a group that would do it, and the sad part is it's not cheap. It's to do it right. You have to do it. Spend a lot of cash. There's no AI speakers in the book, although there are AI characters in the book. Mm-hmm. And I asked them to do it more like the old timey radio show, where there's sound effects in the background to keep things interesting and moving along. Because it's not just a strict reading; it's more of an old time radio show, and that's sort of what I grew up on, Jack Benny and those sort of things. And it's fun to listen to it when you have sounds coming in some different directions.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I just sent my 5th book to the editor, and that'll be the last one in this series. And then I've got I got it's a Time Wall series, not series, but I wrote a screenplay for a Time Wall, which I sent to my producers to see if if they can find some sucker to make it as a TV show. But that one is basically asked the question of, time is constant, but what happens to the time after time passes? And I have the character going through a time wall, and that was some interesting propositions. They basically find just echoes of themselves, single seconds that stringing back through time, and they can speak to him, and they're not happy with the guy going back there. And that's sort of a fun story, but it's different from the space stories.
That's sounds really, really interesting. I never thought about it that way. I mean, I've read a lot of like time travel books and stuff like that, or historical. It sends you back in time, but yeah, you don't really think about where you just were and now where you are, and if is a shadow of yourself, or maybe there is a infinite number of depending on your decisions of your own reality. I don't know, but I find that very interesting.
Yeah. And again, this is I guess it's a theme with me. I wrote it against the tropes of going back in time and changing things, because you go back in time and you're stuck looking at yourself.
Yeah,
and you have to deal with your whole lifespan before you can go anywhere else. So it was a fun little proposition, and we'll see if it goes anywhere.
Well, at any rate, I'd love to read it at some point, because it just sounds really, really interesting. I found all your work was really interesting. And I know that you had, when you talk about the audiobook and how it, is like an old time radio show. And I really like that. My dad, he was a radio guy, listener. Now he's in a memory care facility because he has dementia, but he was always, if he wanted to, he would listen to the sports games, especially baseball, or on the radio. And when he was younger, he listened to the radio shows. And then as he got older and he learned the concept of a CD player, he could order those radio shows, on CD. And he said it wasn't the same, but at least he got to, because like we didn't have all the little static and the little variances, because I think cleaning it up would make it more palatable or something like that. But I think sometimes it's listening to that static, like listening to a vinyl. When the needle hits, you get that little background. It gives you that sense of something. Of course, my dad, he thought Bob Newhart was the funniest man on earth. So
I have to agree with that. He's really good. Yeah, and my first experience with radio was, as a kid, we made some little crystal radios. The ones where you basically, jury rig a small little crystal onto a headset, and you can tune it to listen to radios with nothing else, and that was kind of fun.
Yeah, my dad did stuff like that too. That he admitted.
Yeah, and now I'm just saying I'm old, but that's okay.
Oh, well, it's I think age is relative, so it really just depends on your outlook. And I find I'm more interested in things that happened 100 years ago than, in the past year. I really, I enjoy history. I enjoy my family history more. And I just I like, knowing what they liked, what they did, things like that. My grandmother, she lived to be 101, and she always had some kind of story to tell, and it was always something different. And I would think that it would be because you have 100 years of stories to tell, but it doesn't. It's just kind of brings up where you are, where your path is, and things like that. I grew up with a family of storytellers. And each one was in a different way where, they like to share stories and some did not. My dad was always closed off until he had surgery, heart surgery a few years ago. And the anesthetic interacted with his brain. He had a TBI, and he was missing part of his frontal lobe and other piece due to an accident when he was a child. But the it was like 6 weeks after the surgery, and they said it would affect his memory, and it did, but in a good way. I couldn't get him to, not that I wanted to, but I couldn't get him to shut up and not tell stories. And
that's funny.
And I loved it because he told stories that I didn't know about. And my dad was always quiet. He's socially awkward. He has after his surgery, his IQ dropped to 162. So, he just, he didn't know how to relate to people. So he told jokes, and not everybody got them because they were very cerebral, but I get them and I tell the same kind of jokes. And, my kids just shake their head at me, but,
well, that's half the fun. I've got jokes in my stories that probably most people won't get because they don't have the background for it, but I've got to tell the jokes, and it keeps it light.
Oh yeah.
And entertaining.
Even if you don't get it, I mean, seriously, if you have two characters and they're, they have an inside joke, and even if the readers not quite understand what their inside joke is, but just the fact that they have one that, adds to humor, you don't necessarily have to understand that, what the punchline is. And of course, if you have to explain it, it's not really funny.
Exactly.
Yeah, I took my dad one time to a doctor's office, and there was this huge, I don't know why, but it was a huge digital clock right on the wall. And he looked up at the clock, looked at his watch, and then he goes, "Oh, got to do my taxes." And nobody got it, but I looked and the clock said it was 10:40.
Right.
So, he just was like, and I had to explain it to the nurse why it was funny, because I laughed. I knew exactly what he was talking about, but no one else did. But,
yeah. On that note, I still have to do my taxes, so that's going to stop me from doing anything else for a while. It's always complicated.
It's, but, so when, what really, I know you said, when you turn 70, you're like, oh, you should write, you start writing a book. Before that, were you inclined to write anything? I'm not saying a novel or anything, but did you write other things or?
Yeah, I mean, I actually have a software business for a laboratory information system, and I worked as a lab director in public health for close to 18 years. So I wrote manuals just all the time. It got to be second nature. I don't know. No one read them, which is the nice thing about them, because, you don't read the instruction manuals. I never do. But I had to have them. So I wrote thousands of words just trying to explain how things worked in the lab and how it didn't work. And mostly to keep the inspectors off my back, because they wanted to look at them.
Did they read them?
No, but they wanted to make sure I had them. They were actually something else. They found chemicals in a closet, which I didn't even know we had, from like 30 years before I was there. And they dinged us because we didn't handle the chemicals right. So, you never want the inspector to go rooting around too much in your place.
No, I can see why. Definitely not.
Well, yeah, the stories, the stories are written so to interest basically a 13-year-old kid, someone who's not too thrilled with all this modern science fiction, wants to do science but not sure what they're doing, and it gives them some sort of instructions in a humorous or entertaining way of what you can do with science. And that's really the audience I'm looking for, is basically those one or two kids who need a boost, who want to say, "Oh yeah, I can talk about science, I can do science," and if I can get the few of those interested, that's all I really want. All I really want to do with the stories, and the rest is just keeping me entertained.
Yeah, and they are pretty amazing. I mean, I must say that, if I had a book like this when I was a kid, it would just, it would entertain me, and I would kind of understand what was going on, but also see that, it's okay that I liked science and geology, and, I was, and I know it's, but sometimes it was like I had to keep that stuff to myself, It's like, okay, I can't tell anybody that I really love science class, and I like doing the experiments, and I like collecting rocks, and to this day I still do that. But but I can understand, being a 13-year-old and not being able to say, yeah, look at me, I'm good at math and science.
And especially now, it's less and less important, but it actually still is more important. So we're aiming for the next generation.
Yeah, and I completely understand that. I mean, my youngest two, they just turned 25, but when they were in 10th grade, I started homeschooling them. One, because one of my children is special needs, and he was having trouble being able to leave our house. And then his twin brother, they're fraternal twins, just asked me, why didn't you homeschool me too? And I said, well, I didn't know you wanted it. And he said, I can't get help at school. Like, he was suffering with, especially math and science, he was getting C's. And because teachers were so overworked, he wasn't getting that, the help that he needed. So I'm like, all right, I'll see what I can do. And we did experiments. We went on field trips and to museums, and just doing stuff outside. And the experiments were the ones that, they had the most fun with. And they didn't even realize that, yes, it's science. It can be fun and exciting to see, okay, if I do this, what will happen?
Exactly.
One of their favorite things was making a tornado out of taping two soda bottles together and just whirling it around. And they just loved that. And, they were so glad that, they finished high school. They graduated. We met all the requirements. Plus, I did like the extra stuff. I taught them how to read cursive and, stuff that they're taking out of schools. I made sure that we were including it because I think it's so important to, learning for me is a lifelong, journey. So, making that, and I can see that just by the fun you're having when you're writing these stories. And I could tell as I read them that there is this deep passion for not just you writing, but writing what you're writing, So I could tell so much about that. And
that's good.
Yeah, I recommend the entire series, and then go back and listen to Beyond Luna. 5 stars definitely came from me. So
I do appreciate that. They're hard to earn.
Yeah, I just, if it's a book that I want to read again and again, and since I can do that because I do have the books that you sent me. They're still on my bookshelf. And I can go back to them and reread them. And
as soon as the book comes back from my editor, the 5th volume, I'll certainly send you the one. And that one's sort of a precursor to the other books before the main character, Graciela, is even born.
Oh,
so it shows what her family does and how they interact. And, The only thing I didn't cover a lot was the birth out in outer space, because I had no idea how that would even work. So I glossed over that. But and then there's some backstory there. In the last book, we have a nuclear engineer who failed, and so I brought his story into it. And he failed because he shut off some fireworks using uranium, and they thought that wasn't a good idea because it sort of contaminated the field. But he liked exploding things, so that's you got to have that sort of thing.
Yeah, there are kids like that.
And of course, there's the AI, the biogels, which are all over the place until they stop working.
Yeah,
and they're in all the ATMs, and all of a sudden, no one can get to their money. So the whole society goes back, and they go back to beads, bartering, and IOUs to keep the economy going.
Wow.
And the little AI tablets capture some algal rocket ships, which I invent because there's all these algae that people scrape off the asteroid farms, and they accumulate and turn themselves into rocket ships because they are phototrophic, so they head toward the sun. And of course, they've got they manufacture carbohydrates and oxygen, so they can actually have a little rocket motor. And that was a fun little concept of how you could have an accident and cause whole other species to exist. And of course, the war ends because everyone needs something. The AI tablets need components, and the algal rocket ships like to hang out in Earth's dust field to get micronutrients. So they come to an agreement, not by winning, just by saying, okay, we all need each other. And it was interesting how that worked out, too.
Yeah, I like that, and I can't wait to read the next book in the series, and anything else that you write. I mean,
yeah, we'll try to keep at it. I still got a few more years of writing in me, so I'll keep going on that part.
Well, that's good, and I think when you enjoy what you're doing, it actually shows. In your work, and other people, especially someone who reads a lot. I kind of read a couple hundred books a year or so, give or take.
I don't read at all because I lived across the street from a library when I was a kid, and I read all their books that I could get my hands on in science. And then, of course, working, all I did was read manuals constantly.
Yeah.
But the one group I'm working with, they're looking at turning the whole series into a TV show. And if we can get some, funding, of course, and some people, that'd be kind of fun because it'd be a space opera, but it'd be a complete contrast to all the other space operas that are on TV now.
Oh, that would be so cool.
Yeah, and it'd be real fun. They seem excited about it, but the whole thing is it's TV, and you never know what's going to happen with that organizations or how those things work. But
yeah, especially now with all the different streaming sites and all that, but.
Yeah, if there's a producer who wants to produce my series, I'll be happy to talk to him.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And if something comes up, you definitely let me know because I will be watching.
Oh, I will do that. Me too. I'd be interested to see what happens when these people get their hands on it, if they decide to. I know they'll change it, but we'll see how it works out.
Yeah. You never know how they're going to adapt something. So, but I can't wait see if it comes out, and I will definitely, like I said, I'll be watching, and any book that you release, I will be reading as well.
Great.
Bob, I want to thank you for being on the show. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I hope that this, people who are intrigued by hard science and the opposite of all the science fiction tropes will be picking up your book or listening to it. To close off, I just want to say again, like I said, thank you. And if you wish for you or your book to be on the show, go to amysbookshelfreviews.com/podcast. Thank you for listening. Be safe, be well, and always be kind. Thank you for listening to Amy's Bookshelf Reviews.
If you are looking to be on the podcast or looking for a book review, you can go to amysbookshelfreviews.com and look for the appropriate navigational menu. Again, thank you all for listening and being a supporter of this podcast and of the Amy's Bookshelf Reviews professional reviewers of books and audiobooks. Thank you all. Be safe and be well.